Good morning, everybody. I'm humbled to be on a panel with such prestigious people in the law enforcement community. And what Mr. Wexler said is true. Toronto PD is probably one of the best in social media monitoring. So if you're going to get into business, I would suggest that you take a look at what they do. We certainly stole quite a bit of what they do or borrow. I'm going to talk today about some strategies that the Milwaukee Police Department has used in social media. I don't quite understand the whole Facebook thing either. I'm a Gen Xer, but I'm at the beginning of the generation, so anybody younger than me, that's how they communicate nowadays. And especially police officers as well, they use that exclusively to communicate, which back when I started on the job, we didn't want people to know anything about us, but I guess that's changed. So. To start out, I'll talk a little bit about Milwaukee. Milwaukee's a city of 600,000 people. It's usually in the top 10 as far as poverty rates go. As a matter of fact, we were number 3 last year. It's an economically challenged city, and it's a very segregated city as well. So, a little background on the city of Milwaukee. Wisconsin State Fair 2011, and that's the day that we were called with our pants down, and I did not bring any pictures, so I didn't. But it's true, that's the day that some gang members decided that they were going to go to the state fair and disrupt it. It was an organized event for them, and they went there and started out that day with some fights in the midway. The police response was to break them up, and they allowed the situation to fester. And I'm not criticizing the state police who policed the state fair, but it's the way that we would handle those type of things back then. As the day went on, the fights began to break out, and the police got involved in the fights as well. So the police response was to do a push, which is exactly the worst thing you can do in a situation like this, because they pushed all the gang members out of the midway into the streets of West Allis and Milwaukee. This is where the random violence started happening. People were pulled from their cars, people were beaten, and people were robbed that day. The fallout was 31 arrests, 11 people injured, some requiring hospitalization, including police officers. There was a media frenzy because, as most citizens do nowadays, when fights are going on, they're not helping. They're pulling out their phones and videotaping. So all that video was fed across nationally our state fair. So it was a black eye for the city, and certainly it was a black eye for the police department, because anytime something bad happens, it's the police's fault. The state of Wisconsin already has issues with the big city of Milwaukee, so now they have an excuse not to come to our city and spend their money. So we initially reported that event was not pre-planned. However, as we looked into our social networking, we found that it was, and there were a lot of signs on there saying that it was going to happen. A lot of the chatter was that they were going to go and beat people up at the fair, and that was their plan that day. So Chief Lynn that day decided that we were going to monitor social media 24 hours a day for intelligence. As a result, that day we began infiltrating these suspected groups. We also determined that future violence was planned for the fair that year, and we were able to successfully deter that demonstration because of the social media intelligence. So what was evident is that we needed to be better organized, more sophisticated on how we monitor, use, and deploy resources based on social media intelligence. I'm going to talk today about how we use social media as an intelligence tool, and actually about a little bit of our philosophy before I get into some specific events that we had in our city. The Milwaukee model of social media intel is to monitor, authenticate, and collections management. On average, there are 12,000 comments, photos, and videos posted each day by gang members. Social media is a gold mine for intel. If you're not using it, you really need to get into this. These gang members have zero security awareness. They accept friend requests from anybody, and they're not fearful of any kind of consequences. The Milwaukee Police Department has 5 full-time people who monitor social media, 3 full-time officers, and 2 part-time civilians. The amount of information that these 5 officers gather would require dozens of the old-fashioned intel officers doing debriefs out on the street. This information, we don't have to seek it, they send it to us. The role of the person that monitors Facebook is to catch what's happening on the street, basically take snapshots of what's going on out there, what people are saying, prioritize, analyze, and catalog it in our database. The authenticator is the person who figures out what nickname goes with what name, and it's not that hard to do it most of the time. Their friends give them up. Just got to search for it. The collection management person is the scrubbing and the vetting and making the intelligence actionable, pushing it out to the officers on the street. We also have a geofencing called digital stakeout. This is a great tool because it allows us to put a geofence around areas and monitor what's going on in certain areas. Say State Fair, we can put a fence around that. We can put our own language or the gang members' language into this technology, and it will sort and decide what's something we should look at. So there's 12,000 posts related there put on by gang members. That will reduce it to 250 for us to look at, so it's a much more manageable amount to look at. Our philosophy is to use this as intelligence, not evidence. Some departments will use these postings, they'll take snapshots, and they'll use it as a piece of evidence. Our goal is to use this information for crime prevention, intervention, and aiding in criminal investigation. Law enforcement agencies should exercise caution when using this as evidence. This may lead to loss of intelligence capabilities, and it's also very short-term. You'll lose your long-term gain. Short-sighted use social media posts as evidence for individual cases. Bigger picture can turn to social disorder that leads to the violent crime. The advantages of social media as an intelligence tool is there's no authenticity issues. It is what it is. It's raw intel. You can use any way you want. No search warrants are required, subpoenas required. You're using it for intelligence. However, a policy is required, and I strongly suggest that you get a policy if you're going to do this. If you're going to use it as evidence, the authenticity issues are how do you know the person who's typing on the keyboard is the person who owns that site? That's something that you have to prove. Also, if you're going to use it as evidence, you have to get search warrants and subpoenas for IP addresses. And then you also have to search warrant or subpoena whose account it is. So it's very cumbersome and it's not a sure thing. Policy is something that's very important though. You have to set these standards for your department so you can avoid bad case law. Our policy requires a centralized investigative unit. It also requires training in constitutional law and civil liberties. Privacy and civil liberty policy codifies commitment to collecting info only on those for whom legal justification and criminal predicate acts can be articulated. And what that means is we have to be able to answer why the target is a bad guy, it's connected to bad stuff before we can start collecting on it. Most departments that do this are getting very good at mining social media for intel. What we do with it is what makes the difference. And we have some proven strategies of work that I'd like to share with you. Number one is the most important thing is to strip the anonymity of flash mob participants. That is what gives mobs their courage. They're lost in the crowd, so they feel like they can do whatever they want. The second thing is divide and conquer, and I'll explain that when I talk about our July 3rd incident. Another strategy we use is cut off the head of the snake, which is what we use in our Juneteenth Day event. Also, First Amendment facilitators. We allow freedom of expression and emphasis on public safety. This is for some demonstrations we've had recently that I'll talk about. And the last thing I'll talk about is targeting the gangs themselves. The Milwaukee U.S. Bank Lakefront Fireworks Festival happens every year on July 3rd. This year, social media intel revealed that the gang members were planning on disrupting actually the Summerfest round, which is our 11-day music festival, which is on Lakefront in Milwaukee. They planned on going there and doing some of the things that they did in the State Fair incident in 2011. As we followed the intel that day, they decided to change their plans. They weren't going to go to Summerfest. They decided they were going to disrupt the fireworks display, which was going to happen later that evening, also along the lakefront. There were about 30,000 to 50,000 in attendance for that fireworks show. What they were planning on doing was called Point 'em Out, Knock 'em Out. I don't know if that happens in your city. It's a game that the gang members like to play where they just point people out, go knock them down, beat them up, and take whatever they can from them. They were also planning on having rival gang fights that day. The intel estimated 100 to 200 gang members. It actually turned out to be 200 to 300 gang members. They focused on a hill where a lot of people like to sit and watch the fireworks along the lakefront.